When most kids are dreaming about what they want to be when they grow up, very few would imagine themselves working in a mortuary. But for today's guest, her calling came very early. Growing up in a Muslim family, Sofiya was told that those who care for the dead will be rewarded in the afterlife. Then at 12 years old, she witnessed something that would stay with her forever, a person jumping in front of a train. For many people, an experience like that would create fear, but for Sofiya, it provided clarity. She knew that she wanted to care for the dead. Today's guest is Sofiya Bouabdullah. She is a qualified embalmer and more recently the owner of Melbourne Mortuary, where she leads a team of morticians. She's passionate about her craft and considers it a great honour to care for the deceased and provide families the opportunity to say goodbye to their loved one. I'm Michael Phoenix and this is episode 3 of the Other Side podcast. Sofiya, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me here, Michael.
Sofiya and I met a few years ago at my previous place of employment. Sofiya is a mortician, an embalmer, a mother, and among many other hats. If you meet someone at a party and they ask what you do, what do you say?
I say it depends what the party is, but I usually say I work in the funeral industry. I avoid saying I'm an embalmer just straight off the bat. If I feel like it's not an appropriate place to say I'm an embalmer, I'll say I'm a nurse.
Okay.
And that's gotten me in a few tricky situations because everyone knows a nurse and then they start asking further questions like, which hospital do you work in? And I'll make up a hospital and they're like, my friend works there, which ward do you work on?
Yeah.
Now I just say I work in the funeral industry.
Okay, I'm interested though. Why would you tell them you're a nurse? Why not just say, "Yep, I'm an embalmer"?
I've had a few situations where I've been at social events and it's brought the mood down a little bit, or it's brought up trauma or grief with the person that I'm speaking to, and then they feel like they need to tell me, which I'm always happy to hear. But sometimes it's not the right setting. They might tell me how they lost a family member or a friend. And then, they'll start getting upset and then I end up spending the night comforting them and talking them through that.
Yeah.
So it just, I don't know, I just read the room a little bit. I always want to talk about what I do and educate people, but it's just whether it's the right setting.
I could only imagine that when people do find out what you do, they would be interested to know what drew you into the industry. And so I do want to unpack that, but I wonder if we can sort of go back a little bit and just give us a brief journey as to, where you grew up and what your earlier life was like.
I was born in Fremantle, WA. I was brought up in a very large family. So mum and dad had 10 children. Dad remarried and had 3 more later in life. Mum also remarried and had her 11th child, but she was unfortunately stillborn. But my upbringing was pretty chaotic because there were so many kids. Mum and dad didn't have the best relationship, so that was a bit rocky. And we moved around a lot. Like I think I went to 14 different schools. Wow. And I finished school in grade 10.
Yeah.
But I was raised as a Muslim, so we had a strong Islamic upbringing. My dad was Moroccan. Mum was Australian, but she converted to Islam. Yeah. And when I think back to my childhood, like mum was a strict parent. Like she took on that role very seriously. So she wore the hijab. She was very strict with the rules. Dad was just pretty flighty. He came in and out. But so I lived in WA and then we moved to New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and moved around a bit. So when you were sort of in high school, were you still in Fremantle or when did you move over to Melbourne? No, so I left Fremantle, I think I was about 4 years old, and we moved to Sydney. We lived with some family then. By the time I started primary school, I was in Goulburn, so more country New South Wales. Yeah. And then I moved to Melbourne. I went to primary school in Melbourne and I started high school in Sydney, back to Melbourne, and then high school in Tasmania. Yeah. So there was just a lot of moving around. My parents, by the time that they had decided to separate, there was a pretty nasty custody battle, and they thought it would be a good idea to kidnap the kids from each other
Wow.
in the dark of the night, and then move states, and then the other parent will find out where we are and then do the same thing. So that actually went on for some time, which is the jumping around to different states
Mm.
and different schools. But by the time that's it went to court and my parents gained custody of us, I ended up living in Melbourne with my dad and my three older brothers, and my younger siblings moved to Tasmania with my mum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you close with many of your siblings?
So we're all very close now. My parents have passed away. Both mum and dad and my stepfather have passed away fairly recently during the COVID period. And I feel like since then we've all gotten a lot closer. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your
Yeah,
loss
no,
of your
that's
parents.
okay. Yeah.
It sounds like an interesting upbringing, to say the least. There was a lot going on. So movement from Melbourne, Tassie, Fremantle. So when you finished high school, what was your first job?
So my first job, I worked in a food van at festivals,
Okay.
and that was great
Yeah.
because we got free chips. And I was only like 14 or 14, 9 months. I think that's a legal age.
Yeah.
I was 14, 9 months. And I got to go away on weekends to festivals, and I just felt like a real adult, and I was like, in with all the cool people and stuff.
Yeah.
And then my next job was I worked in a hospital in the kitchen.
Okay.
And during that, it was after I finished grade 10. I got the job in the kitchen and I was studying aged care,
Okay.
which was really, really great because at that point I knew I wanted to care for the dead. So I thought a good way to get into that would be to work in aged care and look after people end of life.
I mean, that in itself is a pretty interesting realization that doesn't occur to many people. When you said you realized that you wanted to care for the dead, where do you think that came from?
Probably from my Islamic upbringing. Obviously, with religion, most religions, like what we do here is temporary and it's all for the afterlife. Like we're judged on what we do in the afterlife. And my parents, told us that all the time. Like, don't put your shoes on the couch, you'll get punished. God will punish you or whatever, just silly things. But I was very aware that this life was temporary. And my father had told me at one point that one of the highest things you can do in this life is to care for the sick and dying. Like it's a role that you will be rewarded for in the afterlife. And I thought about that for a while, and I was like, oh, well, yeah, of course. Like, what an amazing thing to be able to do for someone in a vulnerable situation, like being sick or, after they've passed. And then I thought about, like, who would do that for my family. And I didn't want anyone else to do that. Like, it was so important for me to be the person to look after my loved ones. And the thought of someone else taking on that role just, like, literally made me feel unwell. Like, it upset me, the idea of it. So from a young age, I knew that I wanted to care for any friends or family that had passed away in the way that I understood it, which is in the Muslim religion, we wash and shroud and we'll have a burial. So that's what I understood when I was a child.
Are you still Muslim?
No, I don't practice a religion, no.
So you were sort of studying aged care.
Yeah.
You had this realization that you wanted to care from the dead, and that came from your Muslim upbringing.
Yeah.
So what happened from there?
When I was 13, I was living with my sister in Sydney, and I was late for school. So I got to the train station and I just missed the train. So the doors had closed. I was the only one on the platform because everyone was on the train, and it was about to leave. And this man had walked up onto the overpass and jumped on top of the train. And when he did that, he was obviously electrocuted and his body flung over to me. And I was like, oh, fuck. what do I do? Like, I'm the only one here.
Wait, were you on the train
No,
or
I was on the
on the
platform.
platform?
Yeah, and I was the only person on the platform. So I found like an emergency button that I was pushing, but everyone on the train was just looking out the window because the train had obviously, like, I don't know, short circuited or closed down or whatever. But there was like a few minutes before the emergency services arrived, and I was looking at the man who was, I'm assuming, dead. I mean, he didn't appear to be alive or breathing, and he was a mess. Like, there was blood coming from his mouth, his eyes. He looked like he was burnt, but like, thinking back now, he was probably just very dirty. I don't know what he looked like before he was electrocuted. But I remember thinking, like, oh my God, like, how are his family going to see him? Like, who's going to look after him? And I think that prompted me to do a bit of research. And that's when I learnt more about the funeral industry, traditional funerals, like things outside of the Islamic world. I learned about embalming, and that embalmers look after dead people. I just assumed funeral directors did everything.
Did you say you were 13 when you
Yeah.
saw this guy get electrocuted?
Yeah, and I got detention for being late to school.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. That must have been traumatic for a 13-year-old to witness something, or for anybody to witness something
Well,
like
it was
that.
a bit hard when no one believes you as well. Like, because I feel like if I had the opportunity to talk to my teachers or even my sister or whoever and express those emotions, maybe I would have fed into them a little bit more, if that made sense. Because I actually felt okay. Like, I was okay about it. And I wonder what would have happened if I didn't see that. Like, obviously, I would have learned about the funeral industry at some point, but yeah, that was definitely the time that I was like, yeah, I wanna help people.
That's interesting. So you
Yeah.
would say like that was a bit of a turning point for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 13 years of age, you've
Yeah.
witnessed this tragic somebody be electrocuted at the train station. You're there by yourself.
Yeah.
You're having to call,
It's
or
terrible.
press the emergency button. I can only imagine how hard that must have been. So that's then set you off on this journey of, and I think it's really lovely that you were at that age and in that situation thinking about what his family might have to go through and who's going to
Yeah.
prepare him and wash him and all of that. That's pretty profound. So you started sort of researching about embalming and the funeral industry. What
Yeah.
was the next step in the journey from there?
So when I was at a legal age of working, I started calling funeral homes, and they were obviously like, no, honey, like, you're way too young. So that's why I went into aged care. So I was working in aged care for a while, and I really, really loved that. I loved it so much. I loved the residents. I loved caring for the residents, and naturally they would die, and I got to, wash them and dress them. Their family would come in, spend time with them before they're transferred to the funeral director. And, I was getting that feeling that I was seeking. Like, I felt so privileged, like, it felt so good. And also these residents, like, I had been caring for them, so I loved them as well. So it was therapeutic for me to be able to care for them after they died. I did that, and I went into enrolled nursing. During the time that I was doing enrolled nursing, I was still trying to reach out to funeral directors. This is in Tasmania, mind you, so there's not a lot of funeral directors, especially at that time. And with no luck, I decided to move to Sydney. I thought, if I move to a bigger city, there's more opportunities. So I moved to Sydney, and I was working in an aged care facility there as a nurse. And I had reached out to a bunch of funeral directors without much luck, but one of them did give me the phone number for a trade embalmer in Sydney. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. I finally get to speak to an embalmer. Like, I've never met one before. Like, it felt like, I don't know, it felt like, it's the person you want to be. So it felt like reaching out to your idol. I was so nervous. I was probably I was 18 at this point, I think. So I called this man, and he was very gruff, And he was like, oh, what are you calling about? And I was like, oh, I want to be an embalmer. Like, I'm just wondering if you've got any positions available. Or now that I think back, it's just so funny
Yeah.
because it's not how it works. Like in
Yeah.
the like a trade embalming mortuary, there aren't positions available. There isn't like a
Mm.
beautiful mortuary. Like it's, yeah. Anyway, so I had contacted him, and he was like, oh, well, if you want to be an embalmer, meet me at 3 a.m. tomorrow morning at this car park in Western Sydney in like Blacktown. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll be there. And that night I went to bed and I was like, oh my God, am I being a fucking idiot? Like, I'm a young girl
Mm.
just turning up at a like car park at 3 a.m. to meet some guy who I don't even know. And yeah, so I was just like, yeah, maybe, but also like this is all I've got. Like I've been trying since I was 14 to get in the funeral industry. Like
Yeah.
this is it. So I went to the car park at 3 a.m. and there was no lighting anywhere. I couldn't see a funeral home in sight.
Mm.
I was starting to get a bit sus about the situation. This car rocked up and two men got out and they were like, oh, you the girl that wants to be an embalmer? And I was like, yeah, that's me. And they're like, all right, come in. And they took me through a building, the back of a building. And it must have been like a really old funeral home, but it didn't look like a funeral home to me. It kind of looked like someone's house. And the
Mm.
room we went into looked like a bathroom. And I was like, oh God, what is going to happen here? But there was a cool room there and there were dead people in the cool room. So I was like, okay, it's a mortuary. Um, he did two embalms with me. One of them was a natural case, just an elite man, and he looked lovely. The next one was a lady that probably weighed 180 kilos, and she had an autopsy performed on her.
Mm.
So he opened her up and started accessing the vessels and injecting her, and her organs were everywhere. And
Mm.
I was like, oh wow, I never even thought of this. I
Yeah.
forgot that people have autopsies. Like, what do you do there?
Mm.
So he showed me how he embalms those people, and it was like magic. The lady in particular was very discolored, and as he was embalming, like all that discoloration was just disappearing. And she
Yeah.
had peachy, beautiful skin afterwards. Like she looked amazing. And
Mm.
by the time he had dressed her and done her hair, like you wouldn't know that she had an autopsy, and you wouldn't know that she looked so bad prior to. And I was like, yeah, I want to be a magician too. This is what I want to do. Um, and so I asked him to train me, and he was like, no. I was like, okay. He's like, but at least you know what embalming is. I'm like, okay, thank you. So yeah, I was left with knowing what embalming looks like and no job. And that continued on for a few years. I had moved to Melbourne because I felt like I had reached out to all the
Hang on,
embalmers.
before we move on,
Okay.
you there's a bit to unpack here, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, I've got a few questions.
Okay. Was that an appropriate story to
That was an
tell?
amazing story. No, that was great, but I want to unpack a little bit there. So this guy,
Yeah.
somebody's told you that they've given you his contact details. You've
Yeah.
called him, told him you wanted to be an embalmer.
Yeah.
He's asked to meet you in a car park at 3 a.m. You've rocked up there.
Yeah.
Two guys have gotten out of the car.
Yeah.
It's like in the middle of the dark. Like, what was going through your mind at that stage?
Yeah, I thought I was a silly girl. I was
Mm.
definitely like, yeah, I might be on the news
Mm.
at some point. Um, but I was desperate. Like, it was just
Yeah.
like, it was always in the back of my head. Like, you want to be an embalmer, you have to be an embalmer, you have to care for the dead. And that was like the one opportunity that I had to meet someone and be exposed to the role.
Had they been doing transfers or something? Like, why 3 a.m.?
Well, have you worked in Sydney before between mortuaries?
No, I can't
The
say I have.
traffic's horrendous.
So is that the typical start time?
Yeah, I mean, like Melbourne isn't as bad. Like sometimes I work during the night,
Mm.
but definitely in Sydney, if you're going from like one side of the city to the other to two different funeral homes, it could take you hours between sites, So if you go at 3 a.m., there's no traffic, the funeral home's quiet, the viewing may have been for that day, There's a few reasons.
Well, do you think they were trying to test you a little bit as well?
I don't know.
I wonder whether they acknowledged that, like, I'm just thinking if I were in their situation and an 18-year-old girl had reached out to me and said, hey, I want to be an embalmer, and I did actually go and meet them in a car park at 3 a.m., I'd probably try and, like, go, hey, I know this is a little bit, unusual. Like, was there a bit of did they try and break the ice, or just like, hey, you're the girl, yep, come with us?
No, none of that.
Come into the mortuary, just straight in there?
There was no trying to protect me. None of that.
Did you feel like unsafe at all?
I didn't feel unsafe because they were actually really nice. Even though they were a bit gruff, they were really lovely.
Yeah.
And they treated the deceased. They were really gentle with them, and they appeared to really care. Yeah. I think it probably was a bit of a test, like, oh, you think you can do this? This is, the reality of it. But yeah, our paths crossed again since. So my idea of what those people are like have probably changed. If you asked me before I met him again, I probably would have said, oh yeah, it probably was a bit unsafe, or maybe, yeah.
So when you walked in, you followed these guys into the mortuary, and you're observing them embalming and all that sort of thing. Before that, had you seen many deceased people?
Just in aged care.
Okay.
Natural deaths in bed.
Yeah.
Palliative care.
Yeah. So that wasn't a complete shock to you to see deceased people at that stage?
No, I don't think so. I mean, aside from the gentleman at the train station, I hadn't seen, like, purging or discoloration or decomposition. So I guess that was new. I hadn't seen someone who has had an autopsy.
Yeah.
I've never seen organs before. When someone has an autopsy, their organs are kept in a bag in their abdomen. So that came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. And then the smells, obviously. When someone dies naturally in bed and they're collected from a funeral director 3 hours later, there's not a lot of bad smells. Whereas, someone's been passed away for a couple of weeks and they're at a mortuary, things start smelling and looking different.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah, what happened after that? After that first experience of observing these guys embalming, where to?
I shopped around a bit at Sydney, spoke to a few more funeral directors, and my father lived in Melbourne at this time and his health was poor. So I decided to move to Melbourne and reach out to funeral directors there, which I did. And I spoke to a not-for-profit funeral home here in Melbourne, and the embalmer was open to speaking with me. They said that they don't have a job as an embalmer, like there's no positions available, but, she's happy for you to come in and have a chat. So I did that. And she was like, this is what embalming's like, this is what you have to do to become an embalmer. This is the course, this is that. And I was like, okay, cool. And she's like, if you want to do the course, you need to get in the funeral industry. Stop looking for jobs to become an embalmer. Start like entry level, like maybe start in an office or a reception, or look at doing funeral directing assistants, or, a different role, because you're not going to walk straight into the mortuary. And I was like, oh my God, why did I never think of that? I could have easily gotten any of those jobs. Like it's easier for someone to employ someone off the streets when the job isn't to deal directly with dead people. And I was like, okay, that's a great idea. And then she was like, oh, we've actually got a vacancy here as a coordinator, like at the front desk. Maybe you should, apply for that job. So I did, and I got the position. And when I started in the first week, I approached her and I was like, well, I want to be an embalmer. Will you train me? Like, how can I do this? And she's like, okay, yeah, I'll train you, but you have to come in at 2 a.m. like to do the training before your shifts. And I'm like, okay, great. So for about a year, I was doing that. My shift started at 8 a.m. in co-ward in the office. And before my shift started, I was in the mortuary, and she taught me how to embalm without management knowing any of that. So
When you look back at that now, the advice that she gave you of just trying to get your foot in the door in the funeral industry and working from there, is that similar to what you, like, what advice would you give if somebody asked you today, how do I want to be an embalmer, where do I start? What would you say to them?
yeah, I definitely would recommend starting in a different role. After, while I was in coordination, I started to do funeral arranging, conducting as well. And I liked it. I didn't love it like I do embalming, but I really enjoyed the job. And I enjoyed going on funerals, and I enjoyed learning about the laws and what everything entails, doing the paperwork, like meeting priests, celebrants, how a funeral service is structured, and different options. And that's really helped me as an embalmer, like having that prior experience. It's really good to know either side of those mortuary doors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of
And
sense.
it eases you into the mortuary.
Okay, so you've got a job as a coordinator starting at 8 a.m., but then you're coming in at 2 a.m. What's
Yeah.
with the embalmers and 2 a.m., 3 a.m.? But anyway, so you're coming
Yeah.
in early. She's training you up without management knowing.
Yeah.
How long was it then before you sort of actually started working in the mortuary?
It felt like that was happening for close to a year. And there was an incident where a pacemaker hadn't been taken out prior to a cremation. So I don't know if people know
For
this.
those playing at home, tell them why it's important.
When someone has a pacemaker, that needs to be removed if they're being cremated, just because when the pacemaker goes into the chamber, it kind of like explodes, or it can damage the chamber. So we remove them if the person's being cremated. So there was that was missed on one particular person, and they were at the crematorium. The embalmer wasn't at work that day, but she spoke to management, and she was like, okay, I can't get there, but Sofiya in co-ward at the front desk can remove the pacemaker. And they were like, what do you mean? Why would Sofiya behind the computer know how to remove a pacemaker? And she's like, well, actually, she can do embalming as well. Like, she can do all the things because she's been doing it for the last year. And so they responded quite well to it, that news. I had a meeting with them, and they said they'll put me through the course, and I shouldn't have went about it that way, but they understood that I wanted to be an embalmer because I made it known, and it ended up being okay. But they didn't end up putting me through the course I put myself through. So I studied with FEDA, which is run by Tobin's. It was a 2-year course, I believe. It's like a Cert 4. My mentor continued to mentor me throughout the course, and I qualified and left that funeral home.
So while you were studying, or you were doing this course, you were still working as well? Is it like as a coordinator?
Yeah, I was still working as a coordinator or funeral arranger, probably at that point. And I was also working in the mortuary during the daylight hours because they knew that I was in there.
Was out in the open. Did that person get in trouble, the one that was sort of
No.
mentoring you on the side?
No, they took it really well. I could have been in a lot of trouble though. Like we both could have.
Yeah.
But they took it well.
This instance that you were sharing about the person where the pacemaker hadn't been removed. So remind me again, was the person on the way to the crematorium and then the arranger realised, or how did that sort of come about?
So the person was at the crematorium, and the staff had read the paperwork, and it said on the medical cause of death that there was a pacemaker, but the embalmer wasn't notified, and I guess it was missed, which rarely happens because we usually just double check anyway. But in this circumstance, it was missed. So the staff had asked, has the pacemaker been removed?
You left that funeral home. Did you go straight to another funeral home, or what happened?
So my At that point, my dad was very unwell, and my mum had just been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and she was given 4 months to live. So it must have been just prior to COVID, or just as COVID had started to hit, because mum was in Tasmania and she didn't really trust the medical system there, and she didn't want to die in Tasmania. So me and my siblings, we looked at where like the best hospital in Australia is for pancreatic cancer treatment, and we had found that it was in Sydney. So my mum was like, okay, well, I'm going to move to Sydney for my treatment. Half my siblings live there anyway, so she was close to family. So mum had come over, and I decided to leave my job and move to Sydney to look after her and just be there during that time. And while I was in Sydney, mum ended up living a year and a half, so I was there a while. But while I was there, one of my friends had told me that a guy at her workplace, his father is an embalmer. And I was like, oh, get out, no way. And she's like, yeah, he has like his own mortuary and stuff. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should reach out to him and see if he's got any work, because I was expecting him to be here for 4 months, but it's been a year now. So I reached out to him, and it ended up being the same man that I met in the car park at 3 a.m.
Ah.
10 plus years prior.
Was that in Sydney when you met him the first time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
Yeah, so he ended up giving me work while I was in Sydney as a trade embalmer. But yeah, it was funny because she told me his name and I was like, God, that sounds familiar. And then when I met him and I was like, oh my God, do you remember me? And he's like, no. And I was like, I was 18. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I met you in a car park. And he's like, what? No. And I was like, how do you know? That was like one of the biggest events of my life.
Yeah, he's like, oh,
and it was nothing for you.
I meet 18-year-old girls in the car park all the time.
Yeah, I'm like, how many times have you done that? But yeah, so I worked with him and we ended up, like, I've got a lot of respect for him. Yeah, he helped me a lot after mum passed as well. You know, gave me the keys to the mortuary, and he bought mum's coffin as well, which was really nice and was just very kind. Yeah.
Okay, so you worked with him for a bit of a full circle moment. You know what I'm just realizing is when people find out that I work in the funeral industry, they often are like, how did you get into it? And I kind of try and make light of the situation and make a joke and go, oh, well, look, it's not the type of thing that you grow up. I wasn't in high school going, I can't wait to work in the funeral industry. But you're one of those rare people that you knew from such a young age that this is what you wanted to do. And I just love that, like, you pursued it with everything you had, even like working in aged care, which you knew maybe wasn't the end goal, but it was one step closer to what you wanted to do. I think that's really admirable and shows how much passion and love you have for your craft. So that's amazing.
No, it's just a weird thing. Like everything I did, like it, even at one point, one of my jobs, I did a caring role for a quadriplegic man who owns a V8 supercar team. And so I worked as like a nurse with him for a while in Melbourne before I started at the funeral home. But he paid me a lot of money and we traveled a lot. It was like a hoot of a job. You know, it was very social. I got to wear nice clothing, like got to do all the nice things. And that whole time I was like, what are you doing? You're wasting time. You need to keep calling funeral homes. This isn't the end goal. Like, this isn't what you want to do. Even though I loved it. Yeah. And then obviously going from that job to a not-for-profit funeral home, the wage was less than a quarter of what I was earning with him.
I would imagine that, because I was definitely in this boat before I joined the industry. I would dare say that a lot of people would imagine that embalmers or anyone that works in the mortuary get paid a lot because of what you do. I now know that that's not exactly the case, but could you sort of speak to that a little bit? Do you find that people expect that you make, squillions of dollars working in the mortuary?
People think we're like doctors. I mean, I feel like what we do is like, there's this whole joke about embalmers being called post-mortem vascular surgeons.
Yeah.
And, it sounds fancy, and we're exposed to diseases and bacteria and a lot of trauma and chemicals and everything, and the pay is shit. The pay is so shit. Like, people are shocked to learn what the pay wage is. Yeah, I think like the starting wage for an embalmer is like $25 an hour. It's insane, and there are embalmers working out there getting paid that.
Why is it so bad?
I think because the industry is not regulated. Yeah. Yeah. So being a FDA, a funeral director's assistant, which is a hard job as well, but I feel like there's less going on. Like, you're exposed to less chemicals and diseases and whatever. It's the risk is different. Like, they get paid more than the embalmer. It's not really an appreciated profession.
So now, obviously, you're a business owner.
Yes, I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you do an amazing job. And I know you look after many different funeral homes. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey to actually branching off and starting your own business?
Once I came back from Sydney, so Mum passed away, my dad passed away as well here in Melbourne. I was working for one of the larger funeral homes, and they were amazing. They were great to work with. There were, 5 tables in the mortuary and, 5 embalmers working. I was working alongside a bunch of different embalmers, which I hadn't done previously. I've always worked like solo. And I was enjoying that. My wage was really good. And I started to see problems with other people's work or the way they would compose themselves or treat the deceased. Not that I saw anything really bad, but it just wasn't up to my standards. And it was like slowly beating me down, and I started to hate my job, and I didn't want to go in to work. So because I was working in a large team of embalmers, I was seeing other people's work, and it wasn't up to my standard. And it wasn't the work environment where you were allowed to turn to the person next to you and be like, oh, actually, maybe you should do this, or maybe you shouldn't do that, or, that lipstick's not quite right, or, however minor or major the issue is. And I just really struggled with that. I struggled with the fact that each person that left that mortuary, that was my brand. Like, I worked for that company, and it doesn't matter who looked after the deceased. Like, it's me, because I'm that funeral home, if that makes sense.
Why do you think you couldn't give that feedback to the other team
because
members?
I did, and it pissed people off.
Okay.
Apparently that wasn't the culture we had. There was a couple of embalmers that I was close with, and I was able to be like, hey, like, and they would do the same. But I think that's like checking in on each other's work. Like, you're supporting each other. It's not like criticism.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it to be like, hey, you're really shit at your job, fix this. It's just like, hey, maybe, you've been working on this person for hours, so maybe you're not seeing this issue that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Like, or whatever. Or, I'm better at hair and makeup than you are. Let me fix that for you.
Yeah.
And vice versa. But it just wasn't that kind of culture.
Again, I'm making an assumption here, but I also imagine that when you're working in the mortuary for a larger funeral home, the volume of work that you're doing would play into it as well. Can you sort of talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, so they were a high volume mortuary, but that funeral home in particular, which is why I keep saying they're a great funeral home, they didn't put pressure on the mortuary staff to get the numbers done. Their whole philosophy is it takes as long as you need, as long as the outcome's the best it can be. And they were always, they had appropriate staffing. I even think they were overstaffed. We got paid very well. We got paid very well for overtime to get the work done. They had a really good roster where, every 5 weeks you get a week off.
Okay.
Or they really looked after their staff.
Yeah.
But a lot of the embalmers there had been there for a while, or maybe they just, because of the high volume, maybe it's just easier to be like, one size fits all, and you end up doing the same thing for each person you look after, which isn't the way to approach embalming.
I'm glad you brought that up. I wonder if you could talk through, just for the people that are not in the industry, could you walk through some of the different levels of mortuary preparation? Because some people might not know that there's many different
Yeah.
things you can do. Can you walk us through the different levels?
Yeah, so I'm an embalmer, which means I'm qualified to embalm people, but that's not all I do. Sometimes we just offer standard preparation, which might just be washing and dressing or washing and shrouding, and that usually involves setting their features, closing their eyes and their mouth, and presenting them that way. And then there might be a cosmetic embalm. And so we're just embalming to improve the appearance of the person. So we're focusing on making sure that their hands and their face look nice. And then after that, we embalm for preservation. And so it can go anywhere up to like a full embalm, which would be used for like repatriations or mausoleums. And so for full embalms, we're focusing on ensuring every part of the body is preserved.
I know it varies, but if you had to give an average length of time that a full embalm would take, what would you say? Ballpark.
For you?
For me, yeah. Let's talk about embalming me. I like how you're sizing me up.
Yeah, I'm sizing you up. Maybe look, you're a slim build and you're tall. 4 hours for if you've passed naturally without the autopsy. I would say that I would have you injected in 4 hours.
Let's say there's no embalmings to do for the day. We're talking about standard prep. What would be an average number of deceased you'd be preparing in a day at peak season for a larger volume funeral home?
Oh, for a larger volume funeral home.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, let me ask it this way: what would be the most preps you've done in one day?
So I've worked at funeral homes where I've had to care for 10 to 12 people in that day.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a mixture of embalming and basic preparations. But that's definitely working. I won't do that anymore. There's good exposure and experience, but you're not giving your all to the person.
Yeah.
And the family are paying for you to do that. So
yeah. Let's go back to embalming me.
Yes.
Again, for the people playing at home, can you walk us through what would that process actually involve? So I've come into your care, I'm in the mortuary. Walk us through it. What does embalming actually involve?
So if you came into the mortuary, I'd probably call the funeral director and say we'll need an extra length coffin.
Yes, you're right. I did try and lay in a standard size coffin once and I didn't quite fit. I think I'm 6'3".
You might be okay.
My knees just crunch up a little bit. You could, but it'd be a tight fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the person in our job, so the company I own is a trade mortuary service. So when someone wants us to look after their client, they send us the level of preservation or what mortuary care they're requesting. We will then go into the mortuary, take the person out, place them onto the mortuary table, unwrap them and look at them and do a case analysis, I guess you'll call it. We'll let the funeral director know that, if there's any issues, whether there will be an issue with the person having a viewing, like for the family to see them, if the level of preparation they've chosen is appropriate or not.
What would be some potential issues that might arise when you're doing this case analysis?
Yeah, so discoloration, decomposition, skin slippage, trauma that the funeral director probably wasn't aware about.
Okay, so let's assume in this case the funeral director has requested a full embalm because my family want me to go into a mausoleum.
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through the embalming process.
Yeah, so I would start by disinfecting you. So I'll wash your face, in your mouth, your eyes, wash your body. I will fill the tank with arterial solution to the percentage of preservative that I feel appropriate for you. And then I will decide which vessels I'm going to raise and inject. So with embalming, we inject through the arterial system. and the idea is to like preserve that part of the body through the arterial system. So the solution feeds into the tissue and that gets preserved. So with a full embalm, we usually choose to embalm multiple points because it's more thorough. It covers the bodies, like treat each section separately, and that's just to ensure that they're properly preserved. And then once I finish injecting you, it feels weird saying.
No, it's funny. Go. I'm like visualizing. It's quite funny, but
yeah. When the injecting's finished, we then do a cavity aspiration. So this sounds quite brutal, but it's a necessary step. So we use an instrument called a trocar, and it's a long steel rod, and it's got a sharp point on the end with little holes, and it suctions. So we pierce through your organs and suction out any fluids or gases, and then we go back through and feed chemical into the channels we've made in your organs. And that's to ensure that your internal organs are preserved, that the gases are relieved, and there won't be any purging. Does that make sense?
it does make sense.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I've got all the visuals going on of the
Yeah.
trocar going into me. That's
Yeah.
great. But it also made me wonder. I mean, I know for you now, this is your job. You do this day in, day out. But I wonder whether when you first started working with deceased, were you having those thoughts of imagining yourself in their position? And
No,
what-
I
no?
haven't done that. I try not to relate myself to my work. I think that could be a slippery slope.
Yeah.
But I will say the first time I aspirated a person, it did turn my stomach a little bit, just the feeling of it. But understanding that that part's necessary and why we do it, it's fine.
Now, I know there's no shortage of myths and misconceptions around mortuary work and embalming specifically. What are some of the most common misconceptions that you hear?
One of the ones is that we remove organs, so we don't do that. Another one is that we only embalm people to make money, or funeral directors charge family for embalming unnecessarily to make money. I mean, it might be the case. I just can't see that happening in Australia because we don't get paid well.
Yeah.
What else is there? Do you have any?
That you're taking their jewelry and their
Oh,
gold
yeah, the
teeth
grave
and all these,
robbers.
that sort of,
Yeah.
rubbish.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, we're just really bad people. Like even on social media now, like anything about embalming, it's just like bad. Like we're kind of like, it's like Hunchback of Notre Dame in the middle of the night. We're just,
Yeah. Why does embalming matter? Why is it important?
Yeah, that's a good question. Embalming matters because it gives families options and it gives them the opportunity to say goodbye to their loved one when that may not have been possible without embalming. It also gives the family opportunity to send their loved one home because that was important for them. Like regardless whether it's a legal requirement or not, it's necessary in a lot of cases. And a lot of the time that is with trauma cases, when family want their loved one to come home for an extended period of time, and if they want their loved one to look peaceful and lovely. Not everyone needs to be embalmed, that's true, and it's not always necessary, but we embalm a lot, and it's every time we embalm, it's necessary. We never do it because we don't do it because we enjoy it and we get some kind of sick kick out of being invasive, or we don't make much money off it at all. We actually make more money off standard preparations than we do embalming.
Do you get a lot of feedback from the families?
We do. I mean, I kind of live by no news is good news. Obviously, we don't deal with the families, we deal with the funeral directors, and they will always call you if there's something wrong, but they won't necessarily call you if something went right. But, you know, the times that we are involved with the families, it's always been very positive. And they're usually the trickier cases. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, you know, during my time as a funeral director, I would always make an effort where possible to thank the mortuary team. And yeah, definitely if the family said something positive about how their loved one looked, I would try my best to communicate that back to the mortuary staff that looked after the person, because I imagine it would be a little bit of a thankless job at times, you know?
Yeah, it's a thankless job. But I always say to people, especially if they're new to the mortuary, like, don't do it expecting compliments. You have to pat yourself on the back. And compliments from the family, even though that's a reason you're doing it for the family and for the person who has died. They don't know what you were up against. Like, you may have done an amazing job on someone that was in very poor condition. You may have done the best job that anyone in Australia or the world could have done, and the family might not be happy because it's not exactly how their loved one looked. But they're not going to give you a compliment. You have to pat yourself on the back and be like, that I worked magic there. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes things aren't going to be perfect. And families are in a state of grief as well. You know, they're not always going to give feedback in the moment because they're not thinking about that.
You just reminded me, probably one of the most common bits of feedback that I used to hear from families regarding mortuary work, when I'm sure you hear it all the time, is that doesn't look like mum.
Yeah.
And there's the part of me, what I really want to say is, well, obviously, because you've never seen her dead
Dead.
before. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, how do you sort of deal with
Yeah.
those sorts of comments?
I mean, I know. Does your heart drop as well? Like, you double check the ID tag and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And I don't know if you've ever seen someone pass away, but their face changes straight away. Like, it's their skin smooths out, their wrinkles disappear. Um, and I think just explaining that to the family, you know, they're not alive anymore.
Yeah.
They're not going to look like their breathing self.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do get a lot of like comments of like, oh, they just look like they're sleeping. And that's kind of what you want,
Yeah.
you know, that's what you want. You want them to look like they're sleeping.
Can you think of any case that's really stuck with you, or a family that you've been able to really help, and maybe given that opportunity that was quite unexpected, and what that was like for them?
Yeah, I won't speak on one case in particular just because of that.
Yeah, or you just
You
maybe
know.
speak more broadly.
But there have been a couple, and this is like the more serious cases. We've had a couple of trauma cases where the person, you know, has been disfigured, or they've been told by the coroners that they're not able to come in and ID, so they have to ID the person via DNA or teeth. And that's usually in those like traumatic deaths, it's even more so important for the family to see their loved ones because it's happened so sudden and they're in a state of disbelief and they're like, we need to see them. We've had a couple of funeral directors contact us saying, will you be able to do a reconstruction? Will you be able to give the family something? You know, the family have shopped around and other funeral directors have said, no, a viewing's not possible. No, you can't view. We won't let you. And we always say yes, like whether whether they're going to look like themselves at the end of the reconstruction or not, like, is a different story. But we're transparent with the family. We tell them that they're not going to look exactly the same, that, you know, we can't make promises, but we'll do our best. And, you know, we keep them up to date because reconstructions take some time as well. And we more recently had one where the family wanted to do the dressing and the trauma was quite extensive on this person, like head to toe. So we had to do a reconstruction on the person's body as well. And we met with that family because I did the dressing. And the mother of the person was, oh my God, she was like kissing me. She couldn't because she was like, oh, you know, he doesn't, like, this part of his face doesn't quite look like him, but this and that. But she's like, I can't. She's like kissing him. And I was like, oh God, climbing over him. And she's like, I can't thank you enough. And she's like, I'm so sorry you had to see what you had to see. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Like, she understood. She came from a nursing background, but she understood that. She's like, I don't know how you did, like, how'd you do this? Like, how'd you make him look so good? And yeah, I think families, when it's in a situation of trauma, like where it's a reconstruction that's needed, they're expecting like a lot worse than what they receive. And they're usually just like so grateful that you took the time and you tried. Yeah.
For someone who's watching this and they're sitting there going, this is interesting to me, maybe this is for me, maybe I would consider this line of work. Can you give us some sort of insight? And I know there's no typical day, but if you had to just give us a day in the life of an embalmer from the moment you arrive at work, walk us through a typical day.
A typical day would be going into the mortuary, looking at what I need to get done that day and doing it. I'm really blessed to have my own mortuary and be able to manage my own time and only do mortuary work, which is what I love doing. Each person we treat differently. One person might be like, oh, they want red lippy and curls in their hair, and that's always, cosmetics are always fun, obviously, and it's always nice having the time to experiment. Every day is different, even though I'm doing the same job every day, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if I look at my work list for tomorrow, for example, I could be like, yeah, I'm caring for Mr. B and Mrs. C and whatever, but I haven't seen them yet. Like, I don't know what's ahead of me. I don't know if my day is going to be 8 hours or 16 hours or, because we're a trade mortuary business. Funeral directors can call us at any minute being like, oh, I've got an emergency, can you come right away? And then that would change my day completely again. And that happens a lot.
We got a little bit sidetracked earlier. I was asking about...
Sorry.
No, that was probably me. Maybe I rudely interrupted you.
Probably.
But so we were talking about your business. Are you able to... Did you mention the name of it? I know you're not the type of person to pump yourself up, but
no,
give it a bit of a plug. Talk about what you do.
So my company's name is Melbourne Mortuary. I own it with Jamie Young, who is an embalmer who I trained. After working in Sydney with the embalmer in his trade mortuary, he had his own trade mortuary. So he would go to funeral homes that had their own mortuary, and then he would have his own mortuary where funeral homes that don't have their own location would send their clients to. And so when I went back to Melbourne and I was unhappy in my job, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to open my own mortuary where I set my own standards. Like, I'm going to do what he's done and only work with people that I respect and like working with, and they have to work at my standards. And Jamie, who's also my best friend, I think one night we'll had a bottle of wine and we're like, yeah, let's do it. We're going to call it Melbourne Mortuary and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. So the next day I resigned. And Jamie couldn't commit straight away because she had a child at that point and obviously needed a wage. But I'm more erratic as well with my decision making, and I can't just sit on ideas. So I resigned the next day and registered the business, and I think I had to stay at that funeral home for like another month in my contract. And during that time I was just like slowly like listing funeral homes I was going to contact and be a mobile service. I bought an embalming machine, and by the time I had left that funeral home I had contacted a few other funeral homes that were happy to have me come in and do some mortuary work. And then it grew pretty quickly. Like, I think we did really well. Initially, it was just a mobile service. Jamie was able to jump on board pretty quickly as well. There was enough money coming in that we could pay ourselves enough to just survive. And that went on for a couple of years. And then we got our own premises, so our own mortuary, which was like a really big deal. It was our 5-year goal, and I think we got to it in 3 years.
It's amazing.
And it was, I mean, we had a lot of people help us and open opportunities to us, which we're really appreciative of. So we have our own location. That was important because now we can service everyone.
Yeah.
If you don't have your own location, small independent funeral homes, which there's a lot of them, and we love them, they use our services. We bought a hearse,
Awesome.
which is cool. She's old, but she's beautiful. Her name's Moira.
Moira, where'd that come from?
Schitt's Creek. So the character, have you seen it?
No.
The character in Schitt's Creek, Moira, reminds me so much of my mum. Okay. So it was appropriate.
So you hire that out as part of your business, I'm guessing?
So a lot of the smaller independent funeral homes might not have their own hearse. Yeah. So they hire our hearse. We are happy to take, coffins people to their funeral service or for direct cremations if, funeral directors aren't available to do that. And, we've had a couple of situations where funeral directors, their hearses have broken down and they've called us in a panic. So,
do you assist them with transfers at all? Or?
We don't do transfers, but we're happy to assist with FDA work, so funeral director assistant work.
I'm sure you hear this a million times, but when someone asks you, they find out what you do and they go, I don't know how you do what you do. Yeah. How do you do what you do?
I just don't know how people deal with the living, honestly. I can't. It's embalming and just being in the mortuary setting and doing mortuary work is really therapeutic. Like if I'm away from it, I struggle. I get withdrawals. Do you know what I mean? It's not, do you know what I mean though?
Well,
it's not a job for me. It's like a necessity.
Yeah, well, honestly, I can't say I know what you mean because I've never done mortuary work. I've observed a couple of preps, but I've never really done that work, so I don't know. But working in the funeral industry more broadly, I can say absolutely. I don't want to say it's addictive.
Yeah.
But I can't see myself. Yeah, well, it is a little bit addictive, because it's so deeply fulfilling and rewarding.
Yeah.
That, if I can imagine if I did take some time away, I would miss it deeply.
Yeah. And the actual, I don't know, I guess I can compare it to like art maybe. If you're an artistic person, if you like playing music, you kind of crave that. It almost feels like an artistic outlet for me. Yeah. And I really do love the challenge as well, but it's really fulfilling.
We touched a little bit earlier on some of the main misconceptions around what you do, and I can only imagine that a lot of them come from media and sort of the US. For those who aren't in the know, can you maybe highlight some of the differences in embalming in Australia versus in America or anywhere else in the world?
What I see on on social media in particular is claims that, funeral directors are just upselling when they say that your loved one needs to be embalmed, that there's no requirement for it or legal requirements. And it's just kind of almost like it's a scam or a rort, which definitely isn't the case, particularly here in Australia because we don't make money off it. Funeral directors, I've seen their invoices, they don't make money off the mortuary care. And that is just really barbaric and invasive. And I understand that people would love a natural death and a natural funeral and for there to be, no invasive procedures. And that's wonderful. I want that too. My mum had that. My dad had that too because he was Muslim and, was buried the next day. But people aren't always lucky enough to have that. And to make them feel bad about the fact that their loved one needed embalming or recommended, or to scare people into believing it's a really bad thing is a shitty thing to do. It's just educate yourself before, making those claims. There's a big, movement with it's big in my world, but that's my algorithm on my social media, so I don't know what everyone else is being fed.
It'll probably be in the same algorithm of the people that are watching this.
Yeah, so probably. But the good death and natural death and, being aggressively against traditional funerals and mortuary care because it's all completely unnecessary. And it's what the family needs. I would love for families to be more hands-on. I would love for them to want to do the washing and dressing of their loved ones. I would love for funeral directors to have, sorry guys, but I would love for families to, not to take roles on more, like I wanted to when I was a child. I wanted to look after all of that. So I couldn't imagine not doing that. So obviously I would love for everyone to do everything naturally and do it themselves, but it's not realistic.
Yeah.
Not for everyone. And until people start thinking about death and dying and telling their families their wishes and educating themselves, then funeral directors and embalmers are always going to exist.
Where do you see the future of embalming?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I wonder if I'm going to have a job in 10 years.
Really?
I don't know.
It's not really the type of thing that you can, like, how would you possibly be replaced? Why would you not have a job?
Here in Victoria, it's different state by state, but the funeral industry is not regulated here in Victoria, particularly with embalming. So anyone can be an embalmer. So you could be an embalmer tomorrow if you like. You don't have to have a qualification. And for someone to be repatriated, it doesn't need to be done by a qualified embalmer. And there's no standard level of preservation that's legally required.
What does it take to be a good embalmer? What sort of skills? Again, if you're advising someone like you as a young person reaching out trying to find a mentor, if a young person, a little bit naive, going, "Hey, Sofiya, I really want to work in the mortuary," like what would you tell them? What does it take?
You have to genuinely care. You have to believe in what you're doing and why you're doing it. I am big on not taking on other people's grief. I don't like it when people working in the mortuary, when embalmers get fixated on a certain case because it might be a child or, a suicide or something a little more sensitive. I think people should be treated equally and have the same attention and care taken when they're being looked after. So I think that's a big thing, to be able to keep your emotions in check and also not to grieve for the families. Like, this isn't your person. That's not that's not your grief. You leave that alone. You're just there to make this person look good. You're there to achieve, the preservation if needed, and you're there to give the family what they need. You're not there to feel sad for the deceased, even though obviously you're empathetic. But I think it takes that kind of, I wouldn't say it's strength, but just that ability to compartmentalize or to separate yourself from the grief and trauma that's around you, and to be like, yeah, I'm the professional in this situation.
Did it take time for you to develop that perspective?
No, I think I was always like that.
Okay.
Maybe from nursing, I'm not sure. I remember when I was studying embalming, there was a person in my course, and I don't even remember who it was, but I hope they don't listen to this podcast because I never expressed this out loud at the time. But they had said that the mortuary they worked at, there was a baby that they had looked after, that I think it was gestational age, maybe a stillbirth. But the family didn't want to have a funeral. They were just having a direct cremation. And she felt that that was very inappropriate and careless of the family. And, she had all these feelings and emotions around the death of this baby and what the family had arranged for it. So they held their own funeral in the mortuary for this baby. And that fucking mortified me. I would be so pissed off if someone did that and I was the parent of the child. I find that so disrespectful and irresponsible and all the things. I think it's important for us to respect families' wishes, and it's not our job to judge. We don't understand the position they're in. We don't understand their cultural requirements. We're there to look after the person and do what the family have asked us to do. Like, that's it. That's as far as it goes. I mean, the family may be having a ceremony at Mornington Green. It didn't need to be a traditional funeral. Do you know what I mean? We don't know the story, and maybe they don't want a funeral, and that's okay. Like,
what do you do outside of the mortuary? What do you do for fun?
I do, well, not so much now because I'm time poor, but I dabble in taxidermy. I actually did it as a little side job for a while, teaching taxidermy. I was doing competitive boxing up until I fell pregnant with my daughter.
Wow.
So that was fun. I didn't do well at it, but I really enjoyed it and it kept me fit. And I think with, you know, when people ask, like, when you have a stressful job, what your outlet is, it was definitely, boxing.
Are we talking like you had proper amateur fights or
Yeah,
professional fights?
I had a handful of amateur fights, a couple there. Yeah.
What's your record?
No, we're not doing
Not
that.
sure, no.
It wasn't good. But you know, I would train every day, if not twice a day, and like spar twice a week. And
so no, you don't do it anymore?
I've tried to. It's just difficult because I have a business and a baby.
Yeah.
I have a very supportive boyfriend who has taken on the role of stay-at-home dads, so that's helped me a lot. I wouldn't be able to do my job without his support. So shout out to you, Kirk. I still try and go to the gym though. Like, I like weight training and pushing my body and try and stay fit. It's just, kids are hard, man.
How old's your?
She's 19 months.
19 months. Okay.
And she's so cute.
What's her name?
Ida.
Ida. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So now I'm basically a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah, outside of work. Yeah, not much of a social life. It comes back, right?
Eventually, yeah. I mean, my girls are 5 and 7, so we're still very much in the thick of it. But yeah, I feel like it does get a little bit easier.
Yeah.
My wife and I sort of take it in turns to go and, you know, catch up with different friends. So.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for the baby brain to come back. Like, I need to be able to think straight soon. It's a real thing.
Sophia, we've covered a lot of ground tonight.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming down, having a chat, being open and vulnerable with your whole story. It's been an amazing journey. Thank you again. Honestly, I just want to reiterate how inspiring it is to hear the journey from 14, knowing exactly what you wanted to do, pursuing it right to the point now where you're running a successful mortuary business, your own premises, staff members, hearses. You're really living the dream. You're living your teenage dream. So
I would love to say it's like a rags to riches story, but I'm not rich yet. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
Well, you're living the dream. That's the main thing. You're doing something
happy.
that you're passionate about, and I think that's far more valuable than being a multi-squillionaire. So,
yeah, both would be nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
No worries. Thank you, Sophia.